im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati, osim onoga ko ima žig ili ime zvijeri ili broj imena njezina.
Pozdrav, dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Američke tarife ili carine, kako god želite ih nazvat, je tema današnje emisije. Svjedočimo naime da se je Trump i njegova administracija uvela carine, ili kako oni nazivaju tarife, za sve zemlje u svijetu, sa svima koji trguju i sa svima koji ostvaruju deficit. Za tako važnu političku i ekonomsku odluku treba imati i ozbiljne razloge. Slušamo komentatore sa svih strana koji svaki od njih navodi koji će biti posljedice, što se očekuje i koji su razlozi. Ja sam evo danas imao čast ugostiti nekoga koji je analizirao i promatraće ovu situaciju malo sa drugog aspekta, vjerovatno za mnoge od vas neočekivanog. Zato mi je veliko zadovoljstvo razgovarati o ovako vrućoj temi sa nekim koji je već i nekoliko puta bio gost u mojoj emisiji, ali je uistinu ekspert i dnevno analizira što se događa i danas će vam ponuditi svoj kut gledanja. Moj gost je gospodin Thierry Laurant Pellet. Hello Thierry, welcome again to my show.
Nice to see you again, Andrzej, and thank you for inviting me on your show. It's always a great pleasure, in fact, to discuss with you the geopolitical situation, the economy, and so on. So
today's topic is a hot topic. I hope it will stay hot for a couple of weeks, and for sure we will have a lot to discuss about. But your view of this topic is a very interesting one, and that's why we need a whole hour to explain, because it's in detail and because it's very important for people to know.
Well, actually, in fact, the topic is about to understand if Donald Trump, President of the United States, is going to make America great again, or if he will be saving America right now. If we want to understand the geopolitics, we need to understand first history and economy. So back end of the Second World War, Americans have been putting together the Bretton Woods agreements, specifying that each commodities in the world needs to be purchased with dollar. So therefore, any countries who wanted, in fact, to buy oats or gas or oil or whatever need to buy dollar, and then after to proceed to the transaction to acquire the commodity. This mechanism was helping, in fact, to support the debt in America, and therefore, in fact, the standard of living of America. So as we know, when you are contracting a debt, you need to pay interest for the until the maturity of the contract you have been signing up on. And when the contract arrives to maturity, you need, in fact, to pay the lump sum that was borrowed. Today, this is where is the problem. And we are going, first of all, to make an evaluation and assessments of the economy within the United States in the way that we can understand what is the economical policy of Donald Trump and what would be the outcome on the geopolitical point of view. We need to remember one thing that is very important. Since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what has been happening, Russia and the BRICS have been gathering all the great South countries to support, in fact, an economical mechanism that would be helping them to exchange the commodity within their own currency, which means, in other terms, that they are abandoning the dollar because of its weaponization. United States have been, during 80 years, using the dollar as economical weapons, in fact, to crush the people or the countries that would go against their own policy. So, in this context, Donald Trump is inheriting of an amount of debt that is absolutely gigantic. And we were going to go through all the detail through the slide number 3, if you don't mind.
Of course.
And we understand why Trump is popping out the machete with the DOGE department that is headed by Elon Musk. What Musk is doing right now is cost-cutting massively. Today, every taxpayer is supporting the federal government debt for free US citizens. This is representing an amount of debt of $323,000 per capita. The US budget deficit represents about 28.6% of the government spending, and this is not a situation that is sustainable anymore. The US debt has been doubling in 25 years and represents about 4 times the annual budget. So basically, if we are looking at right now the situation of each citizen within the United States, the annual interest of the debt represents $20,000 per taxpayer. If we are adding the real estate mortgage, the credit card debt, and the student loans, this is representing about $80,000 to $120,000 on top of the federal government debt on the shoulder of each citizen in the United States. So basically, let's look at the evolution of the money printing for the last 25 years. Money printing has been folded by 465%, but the economy hasn't been raising that much. It means that, in fact, United States emit too much dollar compared to whatsoever they are able to produce. If we are looking, for example, to the money printing versus the derivative 25 years ago, the ratio was about 30. This ratio right now is about 465, which means that if there was a major crash on the derivative market, and we are suspecting that this can happen, it means that the United States will be creating a crisis that would make 1929 a little joke or a picnic. Let's go to the slide number 4. What we are observing is that the active population for the last 25 years have been diminishing of 1 million. The inflation has been skyrocketing when the salary increase was only 37%. If you look at the house median price increase, we talk about 265% compared to year 2000. And for the new car, it is about 220%. What does it mean? It means the default is inevitable. The standard of living that Americans were able, in fact, to beneficiate in 2000 is not affordable anymore in 2025. So basically, in a nutshell, if you look at the federal debt plus the unfunded liability, that is including Social Security liability, the medical cares, this is representing an amount of $670,000 per person on top of the personal debt. If we are gathering everything, we talk about something like $800,000 per capita. This situation is not sustainable and acceptable anymore. Donald Trump understands that because he's a businessman, and therefore he is taking drastic measures in the way that he will be avoiding, in fact, a major crash. And for this, he needs, in fact, to reestablish the external commercial balance. That is the reason why he is applying tariff. But we will see that in regard of the global situation of the economy, this is a major mistake. So slide number 5. What do we see is that the revenue versus the spending is gapping seriously year after year. And the deficit right now is 7.5%. If we are referring to what Ray Dalio, Richard Wolff, Peter Schiff, or Mark Faber are saying, which are major fund managers, they are saying that if United States is not able to reduce the deficit by at least 3.5 to 4% in the next 12 months, United States will go bankrupt. So the level of debt that America is facing right now is $36 trillion. If we are looking at the curve, we see that in 2020, at the peak of the COVID crisis, we have a major gap of $4 trillion in less than 1 year. This is major. And since then, the debt have been continuing, in fact, to grow in an uncontrollable manner, which made, in fact, the interest debt that is supposed to be reimbursed every year to $1.1 trillion. If we go back, in fact, to the dashboard of the DOGE, Musk has been able, in fact, to save $170 billion in less than 2 months. Is it going to be enough to shrink the interest of the debt? That is a very good question. We will see at the end of the year. But he's in good progress. I don't know where he can cut anymore, because at a certain time, it will be hurting, in fact, the way that the government is operating. So now let's look at the global market. Today, if we are adding the market cap of every company within the United States, it represents 200% of the GDP, which means that the market today, the Dow Jones and the Nasdaq, are over-evaluated. We cannot envision that in the next year or so, or in a short period of time, the GDP will be growing, in fact, to represent completely the market cap of all the companies together. We can imagine that every company is projecting itself in the future by giving some good projection. But to the point of 200%, this is absolutely impossible. So let's go to the slide number 6. What we are observing for the last few months is that the ISM, which is an index explaining what is the manufacturing production, is going to the downward direction. The consumer price index before the tariff announcement is increasing. What does it mean? It means that, one, Americans, they are consuming less, and this is the reason why, in fact, the ISM is dropping, because there is no demand. And two, the consumer price is exploding because of the anticipation of the tariff. What is going to happen in March and April, I don't know, but this is not going to look very pretty. We will go in detail what are the consequences out of those decisions. We have been notifying that because of the tension in the Middle East, the oil has been increasing dramatically of about $5. But the last days with this announcement of tariff, we saw the oil price that has been dropping back to $66, which is kind of deranging for the US economy for one reason. Donald Trump, during his mandate assignment, has been saying that he wanted to drill. You remember the drill, baby drill?
Yes.
Well, if he does so, that would be in the state of Texas, but this is shale oil and gas. So therefore, the cost of extraction is extremely high, and this is at $66. So basically, at the price of the oil right now, if he's setting up, in fact, the infrastructure necessary to extract the oil in this region, he will be producing at a loss. So therefore, the rentability, the return on investment is not there. So as soon as he will be able, in fact, to push the oil price above $66, he will be profitable. But for the moment, this is not the case. So basically, his policy has been going against, in fact, his final goal, because as much as for the transportation, it is very interesting that the price of oil is very low, but on the production point of view, this is not the case. So we see that we have two policies that are facing off each other, that couldn't match, in fact, the final goal. So I want slide number 7. I want to focus on something that is very interesting, that will explain why, in fact, USA companies are drowning under debt. Companies are rewarding their investors with two ways. Either investors are selling back their stock, or they are getting dividends. Some companies, they decide, in fact, to use their assets, meaning the amount of money that they are making on the net, in fact, to buy back their own stocks on the market. This is a mechanism that is allowed for a certain reason. It allows, in fact, the company's stock on the Dow Jones or the Nasdaq to be more stable and to avoid, in fact, fluctuation. But this mechanism has a side effect. That is, people might think that because the company is buying back their stock, it means that the company is doing very well, and therefore this is pushing other investors, in fact, to buy the stock. So basically, this is a tweaky mechanism that can be interpreted as a manipulation of the value of the stock. Okay. Generally, the top managers are deciding this kind of mechanism also to distribute bonus as stock options. So basically, they are buying the stocks on the market and they are redistributing the stock to their employees with a small rebate of 10%, which make them having potential of bonuses that can be very interesting. Nevertheless, since 2008, what we have been observing is that companies were borrowing money to make sure they will be buying their stock back. This is a very dangerous operation because they were borrowing money at 0% during, in fact, the Bernanke policy. And now the policy has been increasing and the interest rate is about 4.5%. So therefore, they are under financial pressure that makes, in fact, the company certainly more exposed, in fact, to draw. So let's look at the slide number 7. On the left-hand side, you have the graphic coming from the FDIC, which is an organization managing, in fact, managing the banks in the United States.
Just a second. Slide number 7, please.
8.
8, sorry.
8. Okay. So on the left-hand side, you have the FDIC graphic of unrealized gain and losses. When it's above, this is gain. When it's below, this is losses. Look at what happens in 2008 during the subprime. We have banks that has been exposed to $70 billion in unrealized losses. Today, those losses are at a level of $525 billion, which means that the banks are at a very high risk. They have been borrowing a lot of money, and due to their investments, the value of the investments have been dropping on the market when, in fact, the purchase was much higher. So therefore, this graphic is explaining the discrepancy between the bought value and the current value. And if we compare to what has been happening in 2008, we can understand that the banking system in the US is at a very high risk. Let's look at the graphic on the right. This is the value, the outstanding credit card balance. And that means that the consumer have been contracting debt at a level of $1.2 trillion. Since 2020, at the moment of COVID, to now, meaning in a time frame of 4 years, this has been increased by 2.5. The last 2 months, we have been seeing, this is a graphic on the left bottom, we have been seeing an increase of bankruptcy within businesses. And what we are seeing also is that the exposition to the debt to commercial real estate has been growing to $3 trillion. If there is a recession, what is going to happen? Companies are going to downsize the workforce. Therefore, they wouldn't need so much commercial space. So what they will do is asking, in fact, the renters, in fact, to diminish their size, and which means that, in fact, the companies that are renting the commercial space will not be able, in fact, to service their debt. So what is going to happen? Those companies are going to lose their assets because they will have to transfer the totality of the buildings, in fact, to the bank, which means, in other terms, that the regional banks are exposed to major trouble. The exposition to the debt on this sector of the industry is $1.8 trillion. This is absolutely gigantic. And we have been seeing in March 2023 what has been happening within SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. As soon as there was a rumor that this bank was too much exposed and they will be getting some margin call from the federal bank, in fact, people have been panicking, and because of the technology, they have been shifting their deposit to others bank, which made SVB losing $40 billion in one day. So therefore, the FDIC was obliged, in fact, to call the federal bank and say that if the federal bank was not injecting $840 billion in the next week, it will be exactly the same scenario that we have been facing in 2008. That would have been a gigantic disaster. And actually, what I was surprised about is that no media has been talking about this gigantic problem. Slide number 4. Number 9, sorry. So when we are looking at the spread of the United States debt, What we are observing is that the federal government plus the state and locals represent 46.6% of the total debt in the US. This is absolutely enormous. It means that a very small entity represents at least almost 50% of all the spending of the entire population and all businesses in the US. This is the reason why Donald Trump has been assigning Elon Musk, in fact, to do cost cutting and to make sure that this spending will go at least of 6 to 10% down. Let's look at slide number 10. The real estate is leading the spending in the US and the investments. If you want to equip your house, you go to Lowe's, you go to Whirlpool, you go to Home Depots, you go to Electrolux, and you equip your house. If the real estate is not doing well, what is happening? All those retailers are going down. And this is what we are observing. During the COVID crisis, in fact, the real estate market was pretty good. But because at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, the interest rates started, in fact, to grow, we have been seeing a major drop in the purchase of the new house in the United States. That means that the new houses are not affordable, and the only houses that are traded on the market, this is old houses, okay? And this is significant of the economy. When you see, in fact, the real estate that is going down, it means that people cannot afford the mortgage necessary, in fact, to pay over a period of 30 years, especially with this kind of rates. At 4.5%, if you are borrowing $300,000, you will have to reimburse something like $3,000 every month. 4%, 5, it's 10%, is 30, 30 is 15. It's about $1,100 every month. And it means also that after a period of 30 years, the house is going to cost you almost the double. In September, something happens which is kind of significant. FedEx, who is shipping the goods that are bought on the market, has been announcing a major warning, saying that the number of parcels that were shipped has been dropping significantly. When this is happening, it means that in fact the consumer are not buying because they are shredded by the interest rate. And what we're seeing here with the global supply chain pressure index is that it's growing significantly, meaning that in fact we will have some problem of disruption in terms of supply chain. So now let's look at the next slide, okay?
11.
Which is number 12. So let's try to explain what is it about the tariff. Who is importing within the United States? This is companies that reside in the United States. So the tariff are applied to them. And of course, they are paying back the government. It is an organization called ERS, in the way that the trade deficit will be shrinking. But we need to understand also the consequences out of it. Importers are going to push the tariff on the consumer. So at the end of the story, what is happening? This is in fact the consumer that are going to pay that are going to pay for the tariff, and this is going to increase inflation. There is another mechanism that the importer can use. This is about in fact to pressure the supplier, telling them that they need in fact to reduce their margin. But this is not working that way. So therefore, when Donald Trump is telling to Xi Jinping to come in the US to produce in United States, I do not think that this is going to happen. And we are going in detail to understand what are the consequences out of it. So what we have been seeing lately, the last 2 days, is that the market has been reacting extremely badly. Next slide. Okay. Slide number 13. So let's compare, in fact, the different crashes that has been occurring for the last, let's say, 15 years. In 2008, we have been observing a drop of 6,000 points on the Dow Jones, on a period of 17 months. And what we have been observing here is that the market has been dropping of 6,300 points in 3 months and 4,000 points in a period of 48 hours. So basically, from my understanding of how the market are reacting is the following. We have two curves, the blue and the red. It's called the exponential moving average, 50 days and 200 days. When the stock are dropping that way, you can see, in fact, the exponential moving average, the blue line, that would be dropping and crossing, in fact, the 200. When this is happening, it's called a dead cross. And the dead cross is the signal that is saying that we're going to go into a recession, and the drop might be way more dangerous than whatsoever we are observing for the last week. So basically, if you look at the trend that has been occurring during the crash of 2008, in April, the stock have been starting to crash. Then it has been rebounding a little bit, and August, September, October, we have been facing a drop-off absolutely colossal. This is exactly what is going to happen. We are going to see a rebound around May and June, and starting June, middle of the summer to beginning of the fall, the stock market might be dropping one or two times in a major manner. Okay, so the idea, next slide, number 14. The idea of Donald Trump is the following. He's saying, if I am applying tariffs, I am going to force American companies to move from China, from Vietnam, from South Korea, back home in the way that they will be producing jobs. It is not so obvious. He is thinking that he will have the capacity to inject major investments to rebuild how do you call this? The manufacturing industry.
Infrastructure.
So let's look at each case. If you have a unique product, and you know that United States needs this product, you have a monopolistic position. This is the case of China and Russia in regard of uranium, titan, rare earth. So therefore, if Donald Trump is applying tariff on those products, if I am a supplier, I am not going, in fact, to move anything, and I will let, in fact, the consumer buying for this price, which is going, in fact, to generate inflation. Okay? If your product is very cheap and does not require technology, it means that this product can be found in other countries. Then you're going to be in trouble, and you will, in fact, to comply to the policy that Donald Trump is going, in fact, to implement. If your technology requires high qualified workforce with specific skills at an affordable price, and this is the case for Apple, this is the case for Dell, TSMC, and so on, you are not going to move your production facilities to the United States for one reason. You need to find the resources that are capable, in fact, to do the job that is supposed to be done, which means the training is going to be extremely long. It takes about 5 years to be an engineer in electronics. You need to have those people in the capacity to execute the job and to have the interest in the job. And actually, if you look at the population in the US, they are not very much interested in this kind of position. So therefore, to move your facility within the United States is going to generate a very high cost of production, because the salaries are not equivalent in China and in the United States. And therefore, at the end of the story, you are going to lose your competitive advantage, because the product that you are going to build is going to cost way too much. So therefore, the story of tariff, depending on the industry, does not work at all. This is exactly the same thing for Nike. Nike, they are making sneakers, meaning the shoes for running. They are not going to move their facilities, because they know that the shoes they are going to make, despite the fact that the entry level in technology is not so high, but the cost of the workforce is so low in Asia that it will be not compensated in terms of advantage with the transportation by the resources they will find in the US. So therefore, this is like a very big problem, in fact, for Trump, because he hasn't been leveraging this kind of factor. There is also another factor. It is, in fact, the lack of production. Based on the moment you don't have a product on your market and you need it for others' means, if this is like a sub-product that goes in the composition of a final product, then you are going to introduce contention in the supply chain. And this means that, in fact, you are going to block, in fact, your entire economy. So it does not make any sense. There are some others type of problem that they can encounter with the cost of workforce. This is for the tariff retaliation. This is exactly what has been happening with Mexico and Canada. Canada and Mexico has been deciding, in fact, to retaliate on the parts for automotive. They are able to produce parts at the cost of minus 38% in Canada and minus 64% in the US, which means that the maintenance of every car in the US is affordable to the public when, with this tariff retaliation, this is going to backfire on the consumer. So basically, the relocation trend might take a huge amount of money, a huge amount of time, which is critical, in fact, to the economy. On top of it, it goes against the policy of Donald Trump because he tried to make sure that he is shrinking the cost of spending when asking for rebuilding companies and rebuilding manufacturing capacity is asking for major investment. When you don't have the money for something, you don't have the money for other things. So therefore, this type of policy is going against each other and doesn't work. So basically, this can become a very serious political problem for him because in the next 20 months or so, there will be the midterms. And taking, in fact, the risk of putting tariff and to crush the economy, knowing that most of the people in the United States are investing their money on the stock market for retirement, this is going to backfire to him. So let's look at the global picture. What we are dealing with here now, this is what we call a hellish Mobius spiral, based on contradictory policy. He wants to resolve the debt. That means lowering the interest rate to tame the inflation, to increase the buying power of the population, to boost the industry with investments, and to make America great again. On the other side, he's introducing tariff. Don't forget one thing first. The debt resolution is very nice by lowering the rates, but now that the demand in dollar is much lower due to the BRICS policy that has been set up to trade with their own currency, this is making the investors shifting away from the US market. So the trade war is going to generate inflation. This is going to trigger indebtedness of the consumer, slowing the investments necessary, in fact, to bring back the manufacturing in the US. Therefore, the investor will be running away. This is going to lower the demand in dollar. This is not going to support the debt and therefore the hegemony of America. So the debt explosion is going to trigger a market collapse and therefore a quantity easing from the Fed. And quantity easing from the Fed, what does it mean? It means injection of massive amount of money in the US economy, which is generating inflation because this is going to dilute the capacity of the dollar. And therefore, we can face, in fact, a social political destabilization in the US. So let's move to the slide number 16. So the problem of United States right now is the following. In the next 3 years, United States will have to roll over an amount of debt of $9 trillion in a context of the BRICS where the demand in buying the bonds is very low. How they're going to do that, I have absolutely no idea. If Donald Trump is lowering the debt, who is going to buy? And therefore, the debt wouldn't be so attractive. And this will bring what we call a debt spiral, because they will have to raise debt, in fact, to reimburse the debt. And there will be no services for the debt. So I don't know how he is going to be able to do that, but in regard of the policy that he's adopting, this is not going to fly very far. We know, for example, that different countries are abandoning the dollar that were supposed to be friends of USA. Example, Japan. Japan is selling, in fact, the dollar debt, and they are buying the debt of China, which is kind of surprising. We know also, and this is the slide number 17, that China is clearing the debt within the Belt and Road Initiative with a very particular mechanism. They are emitting bonds in dollar. They are using those dollars, in fact, to give them to the countries that are participating to the Belt and Road Initiative. And instead of being reimbursed with dollar, they are asking reimbursement with commodities, meaning natural resources. So basically, the countries that are receiving those dollars, they are shifting back the dollars, in fact, to the IFM, and the IFM is reimbursing the federal debt. So basically, there is a circle that is washing, in fact, the debt for those countries and avoiding them, in fact, to pay interest. But the big winner in this story, this is China. So my conclusion is the following, last slide. In 2025, we are going to face a perfect storm. We don't know if Donald Trump is going to manage to lower the interest rate because the Fed does not want to do it. We don't know if he is going to be able to shrink the interest of the debt in the way that he will avoid the debt spiral. And we don't know if he is going to be able to avoid a major crash on the stock market that will be drowning the United States into a phase of recession or depression. So the next 3 to 6 months are going to be extremely dangerous. And this is going to backfire on us because don't forget one thing. European Union possesses $7.6 trillion in US debt. If America is defaulting on their debt, it means that we are going to default in Europe. This is where we are at.
Well, Thierry, if I can have some notice here, it seems to that bankruptcy of United States government or state is available. It's not possible to avoid it because with or without tariffs, things went wrong already for years. US government was spending much more than it can collect, and in the meantime, they had somebody who wants to buy their debts, but things are changing now. Trump wants to avoid bankruptcy with this trade, as you explained. We'll see what will happen. It's very complicated. Now it's not easy for even special economists to make conclusions so fast. But let's see what kind of impact this can have on European Union economy.
Well, in any scenario that he can lower the interest rate or keep it the way it is, the result will be in increasing the money printing by quantity easing, because the demand of buying the debts of America has been shrinking to a point that becomes extremely dangerous. And if this is happening, and if they are injecting massively the way they have been doing it in 2008, it will introduce a massive inflation for American people because you are going to lower the capacity of the dollar to purchase goods from elsewhere. And if on top of it, you are putting tariffs, this is like putting oil on the fire. So those policies that he is trying to put together are antinomic and does not make any sense. It seems to me that he's navigating on one side one day and on the other side the day after. Is it a way for him, in fact, to position himself to better negotiate with other countries? I am not in the mind of Donald Trump. But in regards of the analysis I've been able, in fact, to put together, I am just wondering how he is going to solve, in fact, two horses that are running ahead of each other, you know?
Tell me, there was a lot of questions why he didn't put tariffs on Russia.
It's very simple, because they are not exchanging anything. And actually, whatever Russia is producing for the United States is in a position of monopoly. You know, United States is using the uranium of Russia. You are going to tell me you can find uranium everywhere in the world, especially in Australia. But this is not that simple. when you are building a nuclear facility, you are indexing the engine on a very specific type of isotope. And you cannot switch isotope from one to another source. This is exactly what Westinghouse have been trying with the facility of Zaporozhye. They wanted, in fact, to switch the Russian fuel to another source of fuel, and it might have been blowing up the entire facility. That would have been even worse than Chernobyl. And actually, Zaporozhye is a facility that is 4 times bigger than Chernobyl. So basically, if this facility was blowing up, the life in Europe was gone. And this is the reason why they have been stopping. Therefore, when you are in a position of monopoly, why you would put tariff knowing that you are going to pay for it? And therefore, this is going to generate inflation, especially when you know that this commodity is about, in fact, to produce energy for you. And you want a cheap energy in the way that your production or your transportation is going to be affordable. So this is the reason why they haven't been putting a tariff on Russia. This is exactly the same thing on antimonium and titan. Russia is the major producer of those commodities. So therefore, as soon as you know that you are in a monopoly position, you are in front of them and you're like, why should I pay something more than what I should pay it?
Yeah. And tell me, what about this answer from China? China decided to rebound, to also increase tariffs for United States. What they want to accomplish with this?
It's very simple. Who is producing all the goods in the world for everybody? China. So what China is having now is a major productivity capacity. They can address any kind of market. And they have their own market, which is representing 1.4 billion people. United States market is 4 times smaller than their own market. They can address the market in India with 1.6 billion people. They can address in South Asia. They can address in Europe. They still have 5.6 billion people that can consume. So therefore, why struggling with the United States? They are saying, okay, guys, you want to play this hardball game? Let's play chicken together. We will see who is going to win. And actually, on a financial point of view, China is in a much better position than the United States. Look at what has been happening at the beginning of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. In 2022, January, Vladimir Putin has been calling Xi Jinping, telling him that the conflict would be not avoidable. What Xi Jinping has been discussing with the bankers has been saying, guys, let's get rid of the dollar. So basically, they have been selling for $850 billion in bonds, and they haven't been buying back. And what is happening right now in China is that they are waiting for the bonds they are owning from America to go to maturity, but they are not replacing it. And who was the major bondholder in terms of country, not of groupment of country like Europe? That was China. So therefore, what is going to happen at the moment, United States will have to roll out the $9 trillion in the next 3 years. They will not have any buyers. And therefore, they wouldn't have any other choice than to use the quantity easing mechanism for the federal bank to buy the debt of the US government. And this is going to be a hell of inflation. We are going into a stagflation mechanism because there will be no production, no consumer, no consumption, and a very high price. Where United States is going with this logic, I have absolutely no idea. This is not looking good.
Okay, this is not looking good for sure. Tell me, is there any possibility that they will provoke some major conflict, maybe even war with China, for example, or to increase crisis in Ukraine because of these economical problems?
I don't think they would increase the conflict between Ukraine and Russia for one reason. European Union have been doing everything in their capacity, in fact, to stop Donald Trump to go and to take over the White House. Trump knows that those guys, they are against its own policy on a social point of view, meaning all the story of wokeism and so on. So basically, Donald Trump wants to hurt the European leaders. He's a very revengeful guy. So basically, he wouldn't bother with Russia because he knows that if he's bothering with Russia, China will back up. And this is an unstoppable bloc that would hurt him even more. Now, conflict between China and the United States? I don't think so, because this would turn into a nuclear war. Who would win? Nobody. And on top of it, regarding the distance between the United States and China, if you want to trigger a war on the Chinese territory, you can imagine the supply chain that you need to put together. Who has the supremacy on the oceans right now? This is a Chinese fleet. And, with the type of missile that Russia is producing now, I can imagine what could happening if Russia was giving to China the Oreshnik missile. It means that, in fact, they can wipe out the entire fleet of United States in less than 24 hours. So therefore, implementing a war so far from the territory, it does not make any sense. But a tariff war, I believe that this can happen detrimentally to the United States, because if China decides to block somewhat the supply chain that allows the economy of the United States to function, you can imagine, in fact, the consequences it can have. It can be even worse. Look, remember what has been happening when Gandhi told the population in India, now you sit down and nobody work. Xi Jinping can do exactly the same thing. You can say, okay, guys, we are not going to work with you anymore. That's it. End of the story. What would be the outcome out of it? United States will go bankrupt in less than a week.
Yeah. That means that Trump for sure took over huge risks. As a simple man, as somebody from Europe, what you would do with your savings or with your business? Because for sure, in each crisis, there are some winners and losers. What do you think? Who will be a winner in this situation and who is in the most dangerous position?
The biggest loser is Europe today. They have been losing the capacity of supply of raw materials and commodities coming from Africa. They have been making some kind of face-off with China. They have Russia that has been crushing them on a military point of view with NATO. The level of debt in Europe is absolutely catastrophic, especially when you look at France. It's just terrible and very, very risky now. What we're seeing here is that the European Commission that decided, in fact, to go at war with Russia when they don't have any means for it, on the capacity point of view, on the production point of view, on the workforce point of view, or so on. But what I am suspecting is that they want to leverage this famous 850 billion funding, in fact, to fill the gigantic holes that they have been digging within the different countries, meaning Germany and France, and to fill the debt. So basically, this is a sort of hidden confiscations of saving of European population. What I would do, running away from the Eurozone, period. There is no other opportunity. And on top of it, because Christine Lagarde wants to set up the CBDC, meaning she wants to control the way that people are going to use their own wallet. This is unacceptable. And actually, we are working with different groups to make sure that she wouldn't be able, in fact, to roll out this stuff. Don't forget what Trump was saying. The numeric dollar, the digital dollar, it's out of question, because this is putting a control on the way that people are living. And we in Europe, to do exactly the same thing. We need to make sure that the European Commission will not, and the EBC will not be able, in fact, to implement this currency, because this is like handcuff on our wrist.
Well, I had some interviews, not some, many of them, concerning central bank digital currency. And we were discussing which kind of strategic they can use to push people to take central bank digital currency. And one of scenarios was bankruptcy of banks. That means that people cannot get their deposits, and then central bank can come and offer them option. If you want to save your deposit, turn it in the central bank digital currency. And of course, everybody will use this situation because they want to save their money, and then they have them. Because if you have everything from the central bank, then you can be completely controlled by the central bank, or your savings, or your taxation, also your spendings. That means everything concerning the everyday life.
Well, there are another solution. Let's walk to Brussels. You know, we gather everybody within Europe, and we walk, in fact, there to tell them that their policy is not acceptable. And if they don't understand, we can explain them that we can switch a yellow jacket for something else. It's very simple, you know. There are very few, and we are everybody. What's the power?
Thierry, that means we can say that this is the end of globalization and beginning of sovereignties of countries, because each of these countries for sure will react, as we saw in the immigration crisis. When immigration came, everybody closed the borders. When pandemic came, everybody closed the borders. Now, if this economical crisis came, maybe this will happen the same thing.
Well, we should distinguish globalism and globalist. The globalism is about, in fact, to take advantage and to leverage the capacity of each country to produce something that we cannot. Because we cannot produce everything. It's impossible. In such a world where the technology has been exploding, the capacity of innovation and the diversity of the product that has been offered on the market, if we want to replace everything, you imagine, in fact, the countries that we need to have, it would be like 3 billion people countries like in China, actually. And this is their force. Their force is about, in fact, the number of people that are in capacity to produce. So basically, globalization is not something that we can avoid. But the globalism is different. Globalism is about this group of people that has been deciding, in fact, to put together a unique government, in fact, to control the people. And they are putting together the financial mechanism to do it. So this is something that we need to avoid at any cost. And if they are trying to do so, the first protection that we can do is to say to the European Union, we are out. We are out of the European Union, and you can keep, in fact, your digital currency and do whatever you want for the breakfast with it. There will be absolutely no other choice, you know. So globalization, in terms of production, nothing to avoid. But the globalism, yes, we need to stop this. And the federalization of Europe through the usage of the digital currency, it's out of question. Out of question. And Croatians, they need to understand that clearly. This is the biggest danger for the democracy that we are representing and for our freedom.
Thank you, Thierry. It seems that we have a very hot summer and autumn in front of us, but not because of climate changes.
I do agree with you. This is a good shot. Very, very good. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy at the end of the weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Evo, dragi narode, imali ste jedan zanimljiv pogled na trenutne situacije na svjetskom ekonomskom polju, pogotovo kad su u pitanju Sjedinjene države. Možda će ovaj pogled malo otvoriti dimenziju cijelog problema i razumijevanje, jer da bi se bilo koji problem riješio, potrebno ga je prvo razumjeti. Svi komentari koji dolaze, a imamo ih svakodnevno, su prve reakcije. Moramo pričekati što će biti rezultat. Ovo je jedna od prvih reakcija, kao što vidite, vrlo pesimistična. I u svakom slučaju ništa neće biti isto kao što je bilo donedavno, što smo i znali. Da li će biti bolje, mislim da najviše ovisi o svakom od nas, o svakoj pojedinačnoj zemlji, o svakom pojedinačnom lideru te zemlje i politici, kako će se postaviti. Da li će prvenstveno misliti na svoje građane, na porezne obveznike, ili na one koji su do sada donosili odluke kako njima udovoljiti. Mi znamo da je Hrvatska do sada prolazila vrlo loše, jer smo slijepo slušali Brisel, koji je doveo nas tu gdje smo sada. Ako smo zadovoljni tu gdje jesmo, onda je to Brisel odlično odradio. Ako nismo, postavlja se pitanje što ćemo učiniti da se to promijeni. U svakom slučaju, predlažem vam da redovito pratite situaciju vezano za svjetsku ekonomiju, jer mi smo dio globalnog tržišta. Ne zaboravimo da smo u eurozoni i da smo u Schengenu. To znači sve što se događa u Hrvatskoj će biti posljedica odluka koje se donose u Frankfurtu, u Europskoj centralnoj banci i u Briselu ili u Strasbourgu. Ne na Markovom trgu ili gdje su već sad zamijenili poziciju. Stoga odluke donosi netko koga nismo izabrali. Netko tko nije bio kandidat na prošlim izborima. Netko tko je izabran nekom političkom trgovinom u vrlo nedemokratskom okruženju ili jednostavno imenovan od strane onih koji su najsnažniji ekonomski i politički, a nisu na listama za izbore. Stoga moramo i sami odlučiti o tome da li ćemo tu sudbinu za koju smo se 90. gorila krvavo izborili, dakle samostalnost, tako lako predati nekom drugom kao što smo predali granice, kao što smo predali kunu, kao što smo predali gotovo svu našu suverenost. I postavlja se pitanje da li još uvijek imamo dovoljno vremena da to sve vratimo. Onog trenutka kada Central Bank Digital Currency bude implementirana odlukom u Briselu i implementirana u Europskoj centralnoj banci u Frankfurtu, tog časa vi nemate više mogućnost upravljati svojim novčanikom. To znači da će neposlušnost biti kažnjena tako da vam uzmu novac. I ništa po tom pitanju nećete moći učiniti ako ostanemo bez gotovine. Neke zemlje kao što je Švicarska, kao što je Slovačka, je uvela u svoj ustav gotovinu kao ustavnu kategoriju. Što to oni znaju bolje od nas, pa su tako odlučili napraviti? Da li mi u Hrvatskoj želimo se dovesti u bezizlaznu situaciju ili ćemo još uvijek, dok mi malo vremena imamo učiniti nešto da se zaštitimo, ovisi o vama. Odlučite što ćete i pokrenite svoje prve korake. Ja sam tu samo da vam donesem što više mogu informacija kako bi vaša odluka bila jednostavnija. Nadam se da ste zadovoljni sa današnjom emisijom. Hvala lijepo na pažnji i uskoro se vidimo u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svojevoljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijer, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi?